You might have to start over. Let me see if it'll work. Go.
My story is the one that when we were going to Utah to see the Sundance, we went to Rock Springs. And in Rock Springs, there was a route that you have to take through the mountain area. Oh, I tell you, that was really spooky. Anyway, we were going along, and all of a sudden, our hood started wobbling and on the car, and started to smoke. Seemed like it was smoking. So Dad, right away, he stopped the engine, turned it off. We got out, and he pulled the hood open. And it was so darn hot, you know, we could feel it way out where we were standing. And he said, well, we'll have to wait here for a while until it cools off. He said, if we had any water, it'd be cooled off faster. And I told him, I said, well, what if we put water in there and that water's cold? I said, would it hurt the engine? He said, yeah. He said, it might. So we waited. In the meantime, we got some cans and stuff ready that we had in the car. We were going to have to pack water. Then we didn't know where in the heck we was going to go to get water. So Dad went one way, and I went the other. We were looking to see where there was bridges or something like that. We could check and see if there was water. Well, where I went, well, there was a bridge, and it was fenced off. And I listened for a long time, and I could hear water way down there. It seemed like it was quite a ways down in there, because you could hear the water all right, but then the sound was coming from quite a ways. Anyway, I went back to the car, and about that time Dad came back. And I told him, I said, you know, I think I found water. And he said, you did? And I said, yeah. But I said, it's fenced off. Well, he said, we can take care of that. He said, you can crawl through there. He said, I'll hold the fence open for you so you can crawl through. All right. And I told him, I said, that's a long ways down there. I can feel it. He said, well, he said, I got a lariat in the car. So he went and got his lariat, unwound it, and we checked it out. It was okay. So I got over there, and I went under the fence, and just as I went under the fence, well, geez, I almost went into the empty space. It was so darn dark, and I didn't have a flashlight or nothing. So I told him, I said, hey, this is just bank is straight down. I told him. He said, oh, gee whiz. So he comes and he crawled under that fence, and he was checking to see how far it was. He'd lay down on the ground, and he'd stretch out with his hands. He kept on crawling forward to see how far he'd have to go before we could see if the ground gave way. Well, anyway, just past the fence, about maybe a couple yards, well, that's where that the drop-off was. He said, oh, gee, he said, that sounds like it's way down there, he said. I said, you going to be all right? I told him, I said, well, I can't pull you up, but I said, you can pull me up. He said, okay. So I got the bucket in my hand, and I started going down along the fence. I was holding on to that fence. And way down somewhere in the middle of the darkness, way down there, I heard when the rocks and stuff started moving when I was going along that fence. It sounded like rattlesnakes. I told Daddy, I said, you know what? I said, I think I hear snakes. He said, be careful, he told me. And I've been in places where I know there's snakes and I can feel it. So I told him, I said, I'm sure there's snakes around here somewhere. So he told me, he said, well, just be careful in the dark. Anyway, I kept on going along that fence and holding on to that fence. And I started going down deeper into the darkness. He kept talking to me. He kept asking me, okay? And I said, yeah, I'm okay. And I got to that one spot where that fence was so bad, it was wobbling. And I told him, I said, I don't know if this fence is going to hold me. I said, it's wobbling quite a bit. Well, he said, let me crawl through the fence here and I'll anchor this rope for you, he said. So he crawled through and he said, you're right. He said, I feel like I feel snakes around, he said. So I told him, I said, well, you be careful too, I told him. So we kept on going. We followed that fence line until we got to that spot where that fence was really wobbly. So he told me, he said, put it around your waist. And he said, that way, he said, in case you fall, well, he said, I can grab you. So I started going down where that fence it was just like toothpicks. Trying to climb down toothpicks because it was so wobbly. And anyway, I made it down. And just as I got to that one point, the ground just kind of went over like that into nothing. And I told him, I said, Daddy, I said, this bank, there's nothing here. And he told me, he said, stick your leg up. And he said, check it around there where you're at, he said. So I did. I stuck my leg out, started checking it around. And I finally found a spot where I could feel ground. So I went over there and I started climbing down that wobbly fence. And I had that rope around my waist. So when I got there, and I had a string on my bucket that I had with me. And I told him, I said, Daddy, I'm going to drop this bucket down and see if I can fill it with water. I said, I can hear water a little bit, but I said, I'm not sure how far it is. So he said, okay. So that's what I did. I dropped that bucket down a little bit at a time. And finally I heard a splash. And I could feel it right away start to fill up with water. So I had to haul it up just quick enough so it wouldn't float away on me, because if it got too full, well, I might lose my bucket. Anyway, I pulled it up, and then I started going back up, hand over hand. And Daddy was pulling on that rope from where he was, guiding me, bringing me back up. Gee, talk about spooks. That was so black and so empty of space down there that it was scary. Really, the banks were just steep. And I knew darn well if I slipped, I was going to be going over the top, down into nothing. Then I heard those crazy snakes. Anyway, I brought the bucket up and I told Daddy, I said, be careful. I said, I don't know what's in that bucket. He said, okay. He kind of laughed. And he dug in his pants pocket and brought out a book of matches. And he hit a match and he was looking in there. Oh, he said, there's nothing in here. I said, okay. So he pulled me up all the way. We got up there on top, and he said, boy, he said, I'm sure glad you came back up. He said, boy, he said, I was scared. He said, I was afraid you were going to fall. I told him I was scared too. I said, at any moment I'd have been struck by a snake or something. I said, going over that ledge. Anyway, I brought my water bucket up. We had water. So by the time we got back to the car, that engine was cooled off enough, so he got on that lid and he turned it, and it came off easy. We looked in there and there was just barely any water in that radiator. But what I brought up in that bucket was enough so we could, go on our way with that water. I want to put that in the engine while we started up the car. And it was all right. I thought sure enough it ruined our engine. But we made it. So we got in there and Daddy said, well, we have a choice. He said, we can go back to Rock Springs and go home, he said. Or he said, we can go on and go to Utah where that Sundance is. White Rocks. Well, Mom said, it's up to you, Daddy. He said, you decide what to do. And I said, it's up to you, Dad. He said, okay. Well, he said, let's try it. We'll try to see if we can go on. Well, we traveled almost all night, and early morning, that's when we got to White Rocks. Oh boy, we went over some crazy roads. At that time, there was no such thing as a blacktop or anything like that. It was all gravel. Some places just kind of just dirt and nothing. No gravel to help you out if it got muddy. But a good thing we didn't run into any mud. We kept on going. When we got in Utah while we went to that Sundance, Dad went over and they invited him to help them sing, so he was at the drum with them. And Mom and I, we were sitting out in the car until it got too hot, and then we opened the car doors. And that didn't help, so we got off. We took a blanket and stretched it over the top of the car and pegged it down. We were sitting under there. We had our own little tarp. Anyway, we spent the whole day like that. Then some friends came over, friends of Dad's. They told us to go camp with them, so we did. That night we camped with them at their tent. And then the next day we were there. And the third day, well, we came home.
Hey guys, I'm having a hard time breathing again.
But anyway, we came home and everything was okay. We came back. Car was all right. We made it over, came back home. But that was one of the few times that I was really scared because I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know where I was going because it was so darn dark. And coming back, we stopped at that spot where we had trouble, where I went over the edge to get water. And Dad went over there and he was looking and he said, by gosh, he said, there is no bottom. He said, it's all straight down. He said, how in the world did you make it down there? I told him, I don't know. I said, something was watching over me. But I said there was some spooks down there too, because I said it was really spooky. But that was one experience that I would never want to live again in that same experience like that. That was really a bad time for me. But that's